Done.
All right. There we go. Recording in progress.
Yes, it is. Welcome back to
Back,
the.
thank you. I'm
Yeah.
back in the real world as it is. Yeah.
No, no, you're not. No, you're not.
Oh,
You were in the real world. You are now back in Canada.
back in the La La Land.
You're
Yeah.
back in La La Land. Exactly.
Yeah.
I we missed you. I had to pitch it while you're away. Don't know how that went. They had to listen to my dulcet tones for 22 minutes. I,
Ooh.
I would ask myself a question and I'd answer it. Think of
Yeah.
that.
Well, we've talked about this before. It's always important that you do that every now and then so that you get an expert reply and maybe even sometimes the answer that you want.
I mean, you surprise yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's a good thing. Just like
So
we've reached that age where having a nap in the afternoon is not punishment.
a nap in the afternoon is good for people of all ages,
Yes,
alone or otherwise. Oh, this is a family-friendly program. Forgot.
it is. So we'll go with the otherwise.
So how was it over there in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Well, it was a very, very good 3 week trip. And we did a lot of the old, real ancient history sights and sounds
Right.
in Greece and in Istanbul. Thoroughly enjoyed the culture, the food, the people. I mean, it's kind of like a reinforcement when you go out and you hear about all the bad people that are out there, all the bad things that could happen. Um, I didn't feel threatened anywhere we were. I didn't think at all that we had anything to fear anywhere. I don't think that there was any boogeymen hiding in the closet. All I saw were people like I see in Canada, see in the United States, see in wherever we've been, is people trying to make a living to support their families. You know, and when we were in places that had kids in them, it didn't matter what color the skin was or whether they had religious uh, uh, clothing on or not. They were there to make sure their kids had fun with smiles and were uh, just enjoying themselves. And, it was refreshing from that point of view.
So you're now back in left coast, and is this still refreshing to be back? I mean, it's you did, but listen, you didn't miss anything. In
Well,
fact, if you missed anything, you missed the crazy stuff that's been going on.
well, it was nice, one, not to have a computer to be tied to.
Yes, there's
And,
something to be said for that.
not that we didn't have our phones, which is, more power computing than sitting on my desktop right now. But um, I didn't feel a need to go in and look at my uh, social media postings every hour. I didn't have a great need to check email more than once a day if I chose to, and if I chose not to, well, I'd get to it the next day. It was nice that, and coming back, I've taken that one. I don't really miss the news from our media platforms here.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
If I want to
you
watch,
wouldn't. Sorry, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say it's unlikely you would have had any Canadian media platforms to watch where you were anyway.
no, but
I
it
don't
was
think we
been
have much of a market.
surprising. We did watch a couple of things. Again, BBC, they actually had CNN over there. But the only thing that we saw that related primarily to Canada was the wildfires that were striking up all over the place. And that seemed to be the extent of any news we saw about Canada. So um, And I met,
You mean they reported all the arsonists running around and
well, they didn't report arsonists. They just reported huge
wow.
fires.
Oh yeah, okay, of course.
I
Interesting.
think from my point of view, that was probably smart on their point because, you can do that, but then you open yourselves up to libel suits.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, if it was on the BBC, which is, you know, akin to CNN in the UK now, but that's just my own personal observation of. I used to be a great fan of the BBC years ago, but I find that they're as woke
Well,
as there's a CBC or the CNN. There really is a chasm between, the various legacy media types.
yeah, I guess that, yeah, for us, the mainstream media, I'm very, very quickly losing, uh, I wouldn't say respect, but I'm just having a hard time trying to weed out what they're trying to tell me. Is it
Hmm.
part of what you really say is going on, or is it something that you've been fed a script to follow? That,
Now, in your wanderings over there, did you find that people were stuck to their cell phones like they are here, or
in
less
certain
so?
places, yeah, yeah. Um,
Because that's where
the
they get their news. They don't watch TV anymore. Oh,
no. And if there was anything that was major going on, I certainly didn't see any people looking at their phones and throwing their hands up in the air and, oh my God, there's been another this, there's been another that.
right.
And I guess maybe that's part and parcel of what mainstream media has done, what social media has done, what phones have done is that we become very inured. Is that the right word? Uh, we just don't feel things anymore. Oh yeah, well, another shooting in Colorado. How many people dead this time? Oh, there was a huge arson in wherever. Oh, gee, that's. I hope nobody was hurt, but I don't know how many are dead, injured, missing. Oh, Gaza, there was another bombing. Oh well, okay. It's become very commonplace. There is no such thing as good, and we've tried. How many times have we tried to find something positive to talk about that? I think this is what episode, what season number, whatever, and
Well,
we're still.
season 4, episode 18. We've
And
been, yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because you know that today being the 7th of June, pre-production, I sprung it on you. 6 years ago, we were part of the big border pole family in Madrid. It
yeah,
was the last time we were able to talk about such things on a global scale in a group
yeah,
uh, in Spain, which at the time was very much a multi-jurisdictional, multinational, multidisciplinary group that came together.
yeah, it was, yeah,
And it was quite something. And interesting enough, as you remember, that was where we were planning our next meeting, which would have been the 7th or the 8th meeting.
I think it was the seventh, but yeah,
Yeah, would have been in India, and the it was to be in 2020, and of course, 2020 was the beginning of the COVID era,
mhm,
uh, which which had its own negative impact on us being able to gather in India at
yeah,
the invitation of the Indian government. Interesting, but it never came about. And in fact, when you look back at it, so much has changed in the 6 years. And
yeah,
now that the latest news here, which most people who watch us in this variation of border poll, which is very different from what we did even 6 years ago, which was, as I said, multi-jurisdictional. We had, you know, 300 people sitting around talking about border security issues and whatever. Fast forward to today, and it's a totally different environment. that we
Yeah,
live in. And our meeting in India never happened. And interesting enough, for reasons that were out of our control. Obviously, there was the global issue, and we were saddled with a government here in Canada, which we never thought of as mere mortals at the time of a small international organization, that our Canadian identity would work against us coming to India because the Indian government was not happy with the Canadian government at the time and essentially asked if we had anything to do with the Canadian government, as you remember. However, in many ways, COVID put an end to that anyway because we didn't have to actually deal with that elephant in the room at the time. And so now we look back on it and we go, wow, what the world has changed so much since we
yeah,
talked about international cooperation at the technical level, at the intergovernmental level, at the
yeah. At
at
the
the
personal level.
national level, at the personal level, exactly. All those things that we had, the juices were flowing, so to speak. And the 2 years while the world was shut down put a nail into that coffin of
Well,
cooperation. Then we have a complete fracturing of the sort of ties that we had managed over 20 years to put together because all of a sudden the Europeans decide they're going to do it one way, no, or the highway for other people. The Americans, of course, totally had abandoned for 4 years any concept of border management. They just basically kicked the door open, and then of course today it's a 180-degree turn. They slammed the door shut. The Brits
just
have,
in Canada,
I
yeah.
mean,
And
Africa's
there
in
was still,
disarray. We have a war going on in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. These are all things that totally have wrecked, frankly, the border pull mission that we had.
well, that and just general perception. I don't think people have a concept of what a border is anymore. You
No,
know,
no,
you
no.
get an airplane and you fly.
It's a
Going back to our trip, I mean, we flew into Germany and we didn't see an exit control visa officer until we left Athens. We didn't even have to go. Well, we didn't, and we saw the border control going into Istanbul, and we saw the border control people when we left. But when we flew into Zurich, we were just kind of in a sterile area and saw nobody. So yeah, the concept of having to have a passport or to do this or to do that, well, for Europeans, I guess in particular, it's there are no borders, and I don't know how that's working out for them. I think it's probably looking what with Brexit and the Dutch and Hungarians and even the Greeks who are starting to say, we don't want to be told what to do by this place called Brussels, and we want to have some control. So I don't know. Is it changing back to that now? I don't know. Is there a role for border patrol in the future?
if yeah, given what we know at the moment, I'd say no, frankly. Sadly, no, because the you have to have, I think, a desire to want to do something positive, which requires work and ethics, be that the legislation or the operations or what have you. This sort of globalist approach to stuff, and this is where the European Union, in my humble opinion, on the border issue has totally failed. It didn't, it started off with, and as you know, I spent many years in Europe. In fact, was paid by the European Union to promote the issue of accession to the European Union, but certainly Eastern Europe. So I know the machinery that was created to entice the Poles, the Hungarians, the Czechs, and so on down the eastern side of the of Europe to join this club of now 27 countries to eradicate the borders. But the eradication of border was primarily intended to make the movement of people
Goods.
with well, yeah, but it was the just to, goods was very clear. If I wanted to ship my apples from Austria to Spain, no problem, or my elevators from Germany to France, no problem. But the migration part was very clear. You had internal freedom of movement. That meant that the 27 internally would move around. That was fine. It was always about the external border, which is supposed to be managed by the folks who were on the external border and the airports. And for reasons that to this day I do not grasp, around 2000 and I would say 2005, they threw that out the window essentially and allowed anybody from anywhere to show up. And then
Mhm.
when they showed up, particularly at the periphery, whether it's through the meds on boats, I mean, we have videos that the old Border Patrol site you can watch even to this day. Go to YouTube and watch the Border Patrol videos that were made at the time of with one of our colleagues who did this with NBC and CGN. The whole business of going into the EU area was completely abandoned by the peripheral countries, and so everybody knew that once your feet touched ground inside the EU, you could go anywhere you wanted. So literally, this is not a story that is new. So you had all these people from North Africa who showed up in Greece, who showed up in Spain. They were in Germany on the next fast train,
Yeah.
or in France. So if you fast forward to 2025 today, we know what's going on in Paris as we speak. We know what's going on in Frankfurt. We know the boats cross from France into the UK totally unopposed, even though the Brits pay hundreds of millions of pounds to the French to stop it. They don't care. So they bastardized the whole issue of freedom of movement within because they weren't able to deal with freedom of movement from
Yeah.
without. They did not, because there was this big movement to say it's somehow you're not allowed to have external borders. And it just started and it became like Topsy, never stopped. So now you've got the Dutch, the Hungarians, the Poles, the Italians who say, wait a minute, this is not the country that we want to be part of the EU, but they don't, they're having trouble facing the fact that too much of a good thing has wrecked it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where they've caused a problem. And so at the moment, if you look at the Western Hemisphere, here we have the United States, which is essentially, again, I think, come to their senses by virtue of an election that you cannot bring in, millions of people into the U.S. willy-nilly through the southern border, particularly, or even through airports, which during the Biden years was an open door.
Mhm.
And so, they've got, depending on who you want to believe, up to 22 to 30 million people who shouldn't be in the United States. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
today, in the last quarter, statistics from Canada, population 40 million now, of which 4 million have showed up in the last 3 years, right?
Yeah.
We took in over 800,000 people in the first
Yeah.
quarter of this year. This is not sustainable. Okay.
Well,
So you're going to see the same problems that have plagued the
yeah.
Europeans that has went right to the edge of the cliff with the Americans. Had the Republicans not won, the border would not be shut. Okay. And so
Well,
you cannot over, it's just like a lifeboat. If you fill it with too many people, it's going to sink. All the best intentions go out the window. And
That's that
so
old saying, Tom. Yeah, the road to hell's paved with good
good
intentions,
intentions, absolutely. Uh,
and you
and
know,
so this is a discussion we would never have had in Madrid or following up in
India.
in India, because in actual fact, the with the exception of the Europeans, as I say, I think around 2004, 2005, threw the baby out with the bathwater for reasons best known to the proponents of and the globalists out of Brussels, who have messed this up big time. But we would have had this conversation in India because the systems were sort of functioning, and there was cooperation between the various IGOs, which I think has gone out the window in the last since Madrid. I see very little of the kind of cooperation that we saw at the coalface level. This just doesn't exist anymore, and no one talks about it. You can see it in places like LinkedIn or in the social media that that kind of professional cooperation has disappeared. In fact, it's now very adversarial as a
Yeah,
at the political level, certainly. I mean, look what's happened between Canada and the US. We had a perfectly functioning border system. It wasn't the greatest between Canada and the U.S. Even in the worst of times between the U.S. and Mexico on their southern border, but the northern border was with exception of Roxton Road, and we all know about that, uh, was working pretty well. But for some reason, in the last 3 years, all that's gone. Okay,
yeah. Well,
and
yeah, and this goes back to one comment I know I made many episodes, maybe perhaps a couple of seasons ago. We have reached a point in Canada here where I don't think that we have control over our borders,
no,
uh,
I
control
agree.
over who's coming in. We don't get rid of anybody. That's certainly for sure. And with the current administration in the United States, not wanting to have not only a porous southern border, but a porous northern border, um, we're reaching soon to the point where if we can't control the people that come into the Canada into the country here, then other places will. And I guess that comes down to my point. We're starting to see people now that are upset that the U.S. is having U.S. ICE people, Border Patrol people, checking people as they leave the United States on the I-5. They're not even in Canada, and they've got the road blocked off, and they're checking people, which that's their country, that's their right. They can do whatever they want. But to get into the United States, if we don't have control over our own situation here, the U.S. will fix that by saying, I don't care if you're natural born Canadian, naturalized Canadian, a visitor in Canada, a worker in Canada, you need a visa to come to the United States. And I don't know how many of our 40 million people who may or may not want to visit the United States would like to line up at a consulate to get a visa. And that's what I'm afraid it's going to come to. If we can't control who is here and who is not here, we're going to see the U.S. putting restrictions on to, like, how dare they? We're Canadians.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
cut the
yeah,
ice anymore.
yeah. Well, I'm very skeptical of what the plan is by the Carney regime, and I call it a regime because these are
Well,
global.
apparently he's got all the plans, but we just don't know what they are.
Yeah, right up there with the budget. I know. If you really want to bring about a uh, hostile neighbor, a superpower, mind you, neighbor.
Yeah.
Just fill the country up with 1.5 or 2.4 million people this year who you couldn't possibly have vetted under any circumstances.
No.
Those numbers are just not possible to vet. Okay, you and I both served overseas. We know how much it takes to process an application and make sure everything is hunky dory. even in the days of our days, you hardly had enough resources to do it. Okay. Yesterday or the day before, there was a question in the Parliament being asked about the literally hundreds of thousands of visa holders who are out of status already in Canada, and the ones who are already here with the bogus asylum claims and so on and so forth. We're talking literally, I think be I think we're looking at probably 1.5 million people who
Oh,
have
yeah.
no status in the country. Okay.
Yeah.
And the question was, how do you know when they leave? And because they didn't answer the question. The nincompoop who is now the Minister of Immigration, she's as dumb as a bag of rocks, honest to God. And that's the nicest thing I can say. We have no exit controls. We've never, ever had the capacity or the interest, I might add, in all my time going back 40 years in this racket, to worry about who left the country. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
Okay. Just, and removals. What removals are you talking about? The
Well,
amount of money that it would take to track down the number of folks who should not be here and track them down with who? Apparently, the same people were hiring to track down the people who to be tracked down. I mean, come on, what are you talking about? Okay,
well.
we got a minister of public security who can't deal with Sri Lankan files because Buddy is, suspect in Sri Lanka. Anyway, I diverge. That's
Okay.
and we're gonna run out of time because we said we're gonna be
Well,
in
but
with
the
you.
other side, just to kind of finalize on that point is that we are so nice here in Canada that we do not want to put a stigmatism on anybody to travel to any other country and have them seen somewhere on the list that they were actually deported from Canada. Like, how bad do you have to be to actually get removed from Canada? Uh, and I say that tongue in cheek, but it's
Look, we
the
spend more.
old adage of it, for every bit of comedy, there's an element of truth. So,
Listen, this country is in deep trouble. We bring in almost 840,000, 833,000 people in the first quarter. I just got on my phone here a message that Ukraine is now going to get another $25.5 million from us. Okay. Unemployment is at 14% for youth, but they don't care about that. So here we have a country with a government with no budget. It borrows billions, right, to make programs no one asks for. We have a whole bunch of incompetent neophytes who now make up half the cabinet. We have a prime minister that, says one thing to us, but probably says something entirely different to the president of the United States, because it's very clear to me that, this elbows up stuff is all bogus. Um,
mhm.
we don't know to this day whether the prime minister is an Irish citizen, a UK citizen, or a Canadian citizen, because he claimed that he wasn't going to use those other two citizens, but there's no evidence that he's ever renounced those citizenships. He may have mailed back his passports, but that's not the same thing. Uh,
Well, he
you
could have
know,
mailed them back to get them extended.
yeah,
Who
that's
knows?
right. Uh, we've just and this
But
week for
also,
me, sorry, go ahead.
he's also the guy that won't even tell us what numbered accounts he's got in the Caribbean for his tax havens.
No, it's none of your business.
Well, I know
Bob,
it's probably none of my
Bob, it's
business.
none of your business, Bob.
It's probably none of my business, but if he doesn't even have an interest in paying taxes, well, and I shouldn't say it's not just him.
What?
There the people like Mike Myers or the
Oh,
Donald
please. Yeah,
lived in the United States and are U.S. citizens and we're happy to be that and don't pay taxes here, but certainly like to tell us how we should run our country.
yeah,
Uh,
well,
you
look,
know,
the topper for me this week, and I've totally lost any sort of respect for this gentleman when he said that Muslim values are Canadian values. This is from an ostensibly a practicing Catholic. Okay, and I'll buy that like I've got some land for you in Florida, which is very valuable swampland. Ooh,
how much?
yeah. I mean, look, I didn't know that the values he's talking about would throw gay people off of buildings, stone women to death, because of adultery, or to death rather for adultery, make women second class. I mean, come on, this is nonsense. This is the same guy that is his eyes closed to the constant harassment that Jewish people get now in across the country. Uh, by these crazy Palestinian demonstrators. They close down traffic in major cities. You try doing that without a permit in any other situation. No one's getting arrested. No one's in front of a judge. And
Well,
these are the values apparently that we now espouse. I don't think so. So he's off my Christmas list, period, as
he
far
was
as.
never on my Christmas list to start with. But the other side of that is that we're still going through the court systems on a great amount of money being wasted to try and get the two Freedom Convoy organizers in jail.
Yeah, I know.
And all they did was sit in Ottawa and honk horns. Yeah,
Uh,
maybe they stopped traffic, maybe they stopped traffic, but they certainly didn't do it across the country, and they didn't do it in Toronto and Montreal and Quebec City and Winnipeg and Vancouver and Calgary. And anyway,
well, look, we kind of talked about one thing in pre-production, kind of went off there, talked about other stuff here in the actual broadcast. We'll pick it up next week, but the real issue here is we have a Potemkin village in Canada now. We're pretending to be a G7 country. We're pretending to have law and order. We're pretending that we have, the respect of the countries around the world for us. We're pretending that we have a relationship with the United States. We're pretending to be a military power that's going to rearm Europe. Pretending. And in actual fact,
and we're also
the
pretending to be friends with China and pretending to be friends with India again. So
Yeah, right. And we're pretending that there's unity in this country, which there's not. Okay, there's disunity, and they really are uh, blind, utterly blind to what is happening at the grocery stores, at the gas stations, at the workplaces, at the
and
schools,
and we'll soon
and
find out how well that goes when we start. Now, what is unemployment? 7%, and we haven't
yes.
even tariff stuff yet.
Well,
We're they plan
how
to.
how imbecilic and incompetent of a government to import more people into a country whose unemployment rate is rising faster than anyone's ever imagined.
Yeah, I did read the answer to that, and I think it's rather simple. This is a government that, well, it's not really a government. It's a party that thrives on willy-nilly spending and good feedback, and all other things be damned. Now, as long as we can spend money and people like us because we spend money, um, that's the answer to them. But I guess it's like, they don't want to table a budget because they know that a budget would not balance itself or anything like that. But
This is in a
we just
pretend country, you can do that.
we can't stop them from spending. And you've raised children, you've got your own house. We've raised children, we've got our own house. And if we wanted to do something, we had to find the money within the means that we had. We couldn't borrow infinitely on that. And if we really wanted something, then we also had to realize that something had to be cut. We as Canadians, I think that's part of our problem. We know that we want more police, but we're not willing to cut anywhere else. We need an armed forces, but we can't cut. What was it? The parliamentary budget officer said that the $800 million, or was it $8 billion, a huge amount of money anyway, went to overseas for spurious pet projects of the government.
Yeah, well, we followed down the same line as the ridiculous nonsense that went on during the Biden administration itself. It's the junior varsity version of the U.S.
Yeah.
Government. We know that. Listen, we have to be within our time frames here. We'll reconvene this in a week's time, like we usually do. But welcome back. It's
Well, thank you.
nice to see you again. And I'm sorry we didn't have a whole lot of positive stuff to talk about today.
Well,
And I a little reminiscing is kind of fun because we know how we get to some of these things. And we really like to talk about immigration and borders and stuff because that's our sort of mainstay. But we kind of digress sometimes.
yeah, more often than not.
But yeah, that's
And
true. But
I do
that's how things have changed. So go ahead.
uh, before we sign off, I do want to say that some of the things that we have said that seem to happen or to occur, we are not time travelers and we are not here from the future.
No, we're
We're
not.
just trying to analyze things and put them into perspective. And even Nostradamus sometimes was wrong. So
All right. Listen, if you like what we have, click the bell, subscribe, buy us a coffee, and we'll see you next week,
if not before,
if not before.
you know,
See you around.
you betcha.